Okay, this is actually take 2 because I was recording on my laptop for the past like 45 minutes and then it crashed. At least the lighting is better now and I've mostly gone through what I have to say once, so maybe I'll be more articulate. I don't know. And also I'm less awkward in front of the camera now too. So I was really awkward in that video, I think. Because it's been a while since I talked to the camera and every time I think, you know what, it's gonna be easy. And then it's not. Because it takes a level of like conditioning your mind, priming your mind to speak to the camera. I had a cup of warm green tea. I don't anymore. So, today we're gonna be talking about loneliness. So, without divulging too much about my personal life, I think I've just kind of been going through, you know, one of those a little bit existential, big life decision moment, and I'm still dealing with it all. But I personally have been experiencing a lot of deep loneliness, and my first thought that comes to mind is that's kind of embarrassing and humiliating to admit on the internet. But my second thought is that it's a normal thing to experience and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. In fact, I think it should be talked about more, why we are so lonely today. And that's why I'm talking about why we're so lonely today. Or at least my theory, my thoughts, and what I think can be done, blah blah blah. I'm not an expert because clearly I don't have a solution to this. So if you're here for a solution to loneliness, I'm afraid I cannot offer anything except to empathize and share my thoughts. I think what made me want to think about my personal loneliness a bit more is the fact that I've gotten to the point where I'm very comfortable with my loneliness, and I don't even recognize when it's loneliness that's really exacerbating my mental state. And it's like a chronic illness, you know, you start learning how to live with it. So yeah, this is me calling myself out as well, because I shouldn't be comfortable with loneliness. I don't think it's normal for anybody to feel comfortable with loneliness, because no matter who you are, loneliness eats at you, eats at any human being. You can never be telling the truth if you're saying that you don't need human connection in order to thrive, in order to survive even. So yeah, we have to talk about loneliness. I think personally for me, my loneliness right now stems from my external circumstances and being at a general crossroad of my life, at least in my mind, but partly also, maybe even significantly, due to the general climate of the world we live in right now. So what do I mean by that? I'm gonna talk about it in this video. I'm gonna break down what I'm talking about into 3 sections, okay? So I have my little post-it here because in the previous video, I went off tangent like crazy. So I'm gonna try to follow the bullet points and not go off topic. So I'm gonna talk about firstly why I think we are so disconnected, and as a result, because of the disconnection, it leads to this profound loneliness, right? That hasn't been as bad as it is now. So I'll talk about that. Secondly, I'll talk about what I think about connection in this digital realm, this digital age that we live in, which is very unique to our generation. Obviously, that isn't like a profound realization or whatever, but I'll talk about my opinions about the relationships that we are forming online. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about how to deal with loneliness, right? Even though I don't have a certified response or antidote to that, I'll share my 2 cents as well as to how one could possibly cope with loneliness. I'm not using my tiny microphone today because I'm in my room. I wanted to go to the beach to record, but it was gonna rain, so no. So I'm in my room, which honestly is kind of cozy and kind of fits the theme today, right? Loneliness. So this kind of like intimate, safe space kind of vibe going on. So yeah, we're using a big microphone. Okay. So first, why are we so disconnected, right? Simple answer is because we're becoming more uncaring and individualistic as a general society, right? Most societies today, in particular first world country societies, we're all mostly functioning under a very post-capitalist neoliberal system, right? And inherently this system is individualistic, is selfish, is focused on our personal gains. That's the general climate of societies today. The focus isn't really on social welfare anymore, right? It's barely on social welfare. It's all about itself. It's all about what can I gain out of this? Who can I exploit to get the most out of this? You know, it's inherent in the system. So I wouldn't say that it's because people inherently are getting worse. That just makes no sense. The focus is on ourselves, right? We're becoming increasingly individualistic. Naturally, empathy for others, caring about other people's social welfare besides ourselves is gonna become secondary or even insignificant. We're hyper fixated on what we can gain out of the situation. Everything is about ourselves. We're becoming increasingly narcissistic just as a natural consequence of this, of being under this system. But I think also, perhaps subconsciously, have to subscribe to narcissism. We have to turn inwards and become narcissists because that's what is celebrated and rewarded under a neoliberal system. In some sense, narcissism is just our form of a coping mechanism, right? To cope and survive, because all human beings want to survive, right? And you have to do what you have to do to survive. Social media just kind of makes it easier for us to be narcissistic. It's kind of like the chicken and egg situation. Like, you don't really know whether it's a system feeding into technology or technology feeding the system. I think on some level, our narcissism really just stems from fear. Okay, so how does the narcissism relate to the disconnection, to the loneliness? I think quite simply, it's because we're so focused on ourselves instead of caring about other people, empathizing with other people. So we naturally become disconnected from the rest of humanity, right? Because in some sense, we are kind of dehumanizing everyone else through our narcissism. Because it's safe, because it's how we survive. Even though inside, we are all acting out of fear, right? We're just afraid that if we present ourselves authentically, if we empathize with other people, if we try to connect with other people, it's going to come off as weak. And we have to bear the real repercussions of being weak in this every man for himself kind of a system. And the scary bit is that the narcissism as an act gradually just morphs into who we are, right? And once it becomes who we are, then you can't really separate it from yourself. You become it. You wouldn't even be able to recognize and separate yourself from narcissism. So you have this weird gaping feeling in your chest. Like something is off. I'm not happy. But you won't be able to pinpoint it. Because it's been so ingrained in you, you know? It's a part of you already. It's kind of like radioactive spreading within us until it kills us. And we don't even recognize the sickness. That's the worst part, not recognizing the sickness. Because how can you get better if you don't know which part of you is ill, right? Technology enables us basically to be more and more narcissistic, more and more self-interested. I think it's kind of why I feel like, at least based on my personal observation, that people these days are so desensitized to tragic news. Like, it's quite shocking. And I think myself, to some level, I'm also desensitized, and I'm trying not to be, but I do find myself becoming increasingly desensitized to tragic news when I read about them or hear about them, and I'm quite concerned about that. I feel like I missed out a couple of points here and there which I talked about in my first recording, but I can't remember now. It's okay, let's move on. Okay, tea break. Connection in this digital realm. How valid are the connections we form online? Whether they are considered human connection or a proxy for human connection, and if that is okay. Okay, so first, I'm going to talk about parasocial relationships. So obviously parasocial relationships aren't unique to the digital age. It's always been a thing. Even in traditional media in the past, we have people reading about celebrities becoming obsessed with them and resulting in very extreme behavior like harassing them, violence, blah blah blah, right? The concerning issue is the ease of accessibility, right? So easy for young, impressionable, lonely teenagers or young people turning to very radical, violent ideologies that they come across online. So this is concerning because the loneliness is driving people to seek connection in very extreme things online. Even with developing parasocial relationships with non-radical figures online, right? Like maybe an influencer, YouTuber, whatever. You can look up someone online. We still ultimately need two-way human connection as well. Ultimately, it's just gonna lead you back to square one, because eventually you will realize again that the void in you that craves human connection isn't fulfilled. So yeah. How about online relationships in the sense of a two-way human connection, right? But how genuine is that human connection? I think the answer is yes, because like I said earlier, right? I think human connection is about a connection of the mind, a meeting of the mind. And I think that's completely possible to do online through our words, right? Our words have so much power. The issue is whether or not someone is presenting themselves in a genuine, authentic way online. So that is also a concern, right? In real life human interactions, but it's so much easier to hide who you really are online or try to paint yourself in a specific light online because you're kind of hiding behind the screen, right? It's easier to curate who you are as a person online, and that can be very misleading, but it's very tempting to do that, right? If it's so easy. So that's the issue, I think, with forming genuine human connections online. So yeah, those are my thoughts. And now moving on to the final thing we're going to talk about. How do we deal with it, right? Okay, I'm going to talk a bit softer because my throat is so sore. Truth be told, I don't have an answer, unfortunately. But my hypothesis, again, is that human connection today comes at the price of sacrificing your sense of safety, emotional safety. You must be willing to put yourself out there, because I think we're all just standing there masking our need for genuine human connection, but everyone's fearful to be the first one to step up and say, you know what guys, we're all feeling this way, so let's just drop the act. If we all harbor this mentality, right? Okay, I'll be the first person to initiate. I'll be the first person to be authentic, to be myself, to speak my mind, to be vulnerable. So I think that the antidote to loneliness is a little bit of bravery, you know? But of course, with the prerequisite that you have to first acknowledge, recognize, be conscious to the fact that the system is making us this way and it's not a part of who we are inherently. It's difficult, of course, because it's not like you can pinpoint the source of why this is the state of affairs now, because it's kind of like a trickle-down effect infiltrating every aspect of our lives. So it's hard to point to like one person, one institution and just say, you're the problem, and you can just get rid of that. It's too entrenched within everything around us, so everything is kind of contaminated. So the only thing with the conscious ability to fight against that is our own consciousness, right? Which we can nurture, which we can protect. At least that's what I believe. I think here I'm making the presumption that humans aren't inherently evil or out to get each other when in a state of peace. I think in a state of peace, human beings are inherently good. They want to connect with other people. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the epidemic of loneliness. Feel free to disagree with me. Tell me what you disagree with. There's a lot I don't know. Well, I haven't held the camera in so long, but it was nice. Feel free to share your thoughts as usual. Isn't it kind of poignant that me videoing myself, posting myself, talking about things on the internet is my attempt at alleviating loneliness, right? If you watched to here, thank you for watching. I hope you resonate with some things that I said. I hope maybe you feel a little less alone about certain thoughts that you have. Yep, that's all. Good night.